It's May 22nd, 2014. I'm here with John Hitchcock. This is Doug Stout. John, where were you born?
Newark, Ohio,
And what was your birth date?
May 24th, 1947.
And you enlisted in the service?
Yes, Air Force.
Okay. And was there a reason you enlisted instead of...
Uh, I enlisted in the Air Force to avoid going to Vietnam,
Okay.
hopefully.
But things didn't work out that way, you told me. You told me you
No.
took some tests and they told you could pick what you wanted?
Yeah, at the time I enlisted, yeah, that's what they told me. As soon as I got out of basic training, they gave me orders to go to Vietnamese language school. And I took it up about 3 levels before I ran into a brick wall. And they basically told me I was going to do what they told me to do because it was the Air Force's needs outweighed what supposedly I had been guaranteed. So.
Had you taken foreign languages and such that they would have thought you were adept at it, or?
Well, when we were in basic, we took tests for all kinds of stuff, and we didn't even know what they were for. And apparently, I did well on the language test, and I had taken French in high school. So.
Did you go to Newark High?
Yes, I did.
Who was your French teacher? Was it Mr. Fraser?
Mr. Fraser, and there was a lady.
Okay.
That I can't remember her name.
It's just a side note. We talked to Bill Fraser. I don't know. Do you know he was at Normandy?
No, I didn't.
He was a medic and landed at Omaha Beach. And he's still going. I mean, he still looks like Mr. Fraser.
Yeah.
I just talked to him not too long ago. But anyway, aside from that, so where did you do your basic?
Lackland Air Force Base,
Okay.
just outside San Antonio, Texas.
So then, where do they send you to learn Vietnamese?
They called it the Defense Language Institute West Coast. It was in Monterey, California. I told them I'd re-enlist for 20 years. They'd leave me there. No dice.
They wouldn't do that deal, huh?
No.
So, I mean, I can't imagine how intensive that was to try to learn Vietnamese. I mean, did they tell you why? I mean, if you were going to be listening to messages, or...
I don't. They never gave us the full deal what we were going to be doing, other than just going to school. It was
Okay.
It was like going to, like in the Army they call it AIT.
Right.
It was just a school you were going to go to. Well, I was supposed to be going to someplace down on the Gulf Coast. I was under the impression that's where I was going to go. The recruiters told me that.
Right.
For electronics, but at the end of basic, I got orders to go to California for language school, and I couldn't talk them out of it. So.
And what year would this be?
I went in '69,
Okay.
September '69, got out of basic 8 weeks later, and then came home on leave and about I think a week or two, and then had to show up at the language school in California.
How long was that school?
51 weeks, just short of a year.
And they expected you to know Vietnamese by the time you got out of there?
It was mostly military jargon.
Okay.
Wasn't proficient to speak the language. I learned more after I got there than I did in the year I was in school. Most of it was set up for radio transmissions, radio traffic and stuff like that.
So you caught phrases and things like that, so you could identify troop movements, probably, and things.
We learned enough to be able to, order something at a restaurant or stuff like that, but most of it was geared after we got over my name is and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Then we got into military.
How were you treated in California? Okay, go ahead. How were you treated in California by the people? I mean, did you have any trouble? Because I know some guys did in different places.
Not at that time.
Okay.
Uh, you might as well have GI tattooed on your forehead because everybody had long hair except
Right.
us. And so it was pretty apparent that, you know, nobody would have a haircut like we had unless you were in the military. So, but as far as the people, I didn't have any trouble with, you know, with the people at that time. Now, when I came back from Vietnam, it was a different story. So.
Okay. Well, we'll get into that then. So from school you went. Then did they just ship you into Vietnam from school?
Oh no, had probably another 6-8 months of survival schools, different training for aircraft and stuff like that. And it was probably, I'd been in close to 2 years by the time I got to Vietnam.
Did you wonder what you gotten yourself into with survival school and everything when you thought you were going to be doing electronics?
Well, once I ended up going to Vietnamese language school, I knew they weren't going to send me to Germany. Okay. So I had a good idea where I was going.
Right. So you did the survival, and then you went. Then they shipped you to Vietnam. Did they give you any time?
I had about a month leave before I had to show up in California to take the flight over.
Okay. So then where did you go from there? In Vietnam.
We landed in Saigon. We were on a commercial flight into Saigon. It all kind of seemed like a surreal situation until the door opened. And when the door opened and that 100+ degree heat came into the cabin, it had like attacked as we were walking out. That was when I realized what have I got myself into.
I mean, I've heard that from somebody else. They talked about just the oppressive heat and humidity. Just when you first got there, it was just terrible.
Yeah, it took a little getting used to.
I bet. So then, where did you move out from Saigon? Where did you stay?
I was in Saigon probably a couple months, and it was flying in the local area, and basically just getting our feet wet. And then I went to Da Nang. They called Da Nang Rocket City, and that's where I spent most of my time, except for when I was TDY to different places in South Vietnam and Thailand.
So why did they call Da Nang Rocket City?
Because we got rocketed about every night.
Okay. I thought that was probably what it was, but I wondered. Now, you don't have any pictures of yourself in military uniform.
No.
And why is that?
The only picture I can remember even having taken was in basic. And I think I told you earlier that they wanted to sell it to us, and I wasn't in the buying mood, so I don't even have that picture.
Right.
But once we got into these are pipeline schools. Once you got into the language school, then you got out of language school and you knew you were. I probably went to half a dozen different survival schools. Some of them probably listed on there.
Right.
But they were all a pipeline to eventually get me to where I was going. And anywhere along the line, if you washed out, then you didn't go. But since everybody was trying to wash out, it was pretty difficult to do. You know, I remember one guy that got out of language school, and he had to go to extremes to do that. So.
Did he avoid Vietnam then, I wonder? Or?
Yeah, they punished him severely. They sent him to Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas for the rest of his career.
It's hard.
Tour there, yeah.
Wow.
Really hammered him.
I guess. So when you were in Vietnam, were you in uniform?
We were in a flight suit when we were on duty. Mm-hmm. Most of the rest of the time, when I was on base, I was running around in shorts and a t-shirt, flip-flops.
So what exactly were you supposed to be doing there in Vietnam then?
Well, I was an airborne intercept operator.
Okay.
And I would listen to the radio, turn the dial, pick up people speaking Vietnamese, and determine whether it was something that we were looking for Most of the time we knew where they were at. We knew what frequencies they were on, and I listened to them. The plane I was on did direction finding. We could pinpoint where that transmission antenna was within 3 meters. So that was what we were doing.
Okay.
We had a plane that had linguists and Morse code operators on it, and we flew around trying to get them to come up and talk so we could figure out where they were at. And then 90% of the time we ignored it because they didn't want them to know we had the capability.
Oh, okay.
The other 10% was when they got too close, and then usually they'd send the Army out to stumble over where they were at,
Right.
make them think that they were found by the ground pounders.
So it made think it was an accident, so they didn't know and start trying to
Yeah,
change what they were
right.
doing. Did you ever receive any fire when you were up on the plane?
Sure.
They knew you were up there.
Oh, sure.
I didn't know how low did you have to go to.
Our plane could only go 10,000 feet. If it went any above that, we didn't have any oxygen. And the plane I flew on was a reconfigured DC-3, C-47 in the Air Force. The ones that you see falling out of the sky in the old Tarzan movies.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yes.
Okay. Was there any part of any of those missions that stand out in your mind as more than any other?
Yeah, one in particular. We had a rocket, some kind of surface-to-air missile launched at us as we were going toward it. And they had to dive to get under it. Those planes are cargo planes. They're not maneuverable.
Right.
They can't turn and burn like the jets.
Right.
And we got down pretty low before they got control of it. And we were looking for this particular site because we hadn't heard anything from it. And apparently what had happened was they had gone to a ground line. They weren't using the radio anymore. And we were supposed to go around it and try to get them, because usually they would talk about us, here comes one of those planes,
Right.
We'll shoot at them. And we'd hear that, and of course we wouldn't get close enough. We were going around and around and around, and the navigator ran us right over top of where that gun had been. And when we got back on the ground, there was an altercation between the pilot and the navigator, and so that sticks out in my mind.
Because you probably didn't have any weapons on that. Really.
Had a pistol. They give you a pistol,
Right.
12 bullets, just enough to make somebody mad.
Just in case. Now, your dad was in World War II, and he had a crash, and he had to be helped by the French resistance and everything. Did any of that play in your mind while you were over there? Thinking about your dad's service or what he'd gone through, or were you just too busy to even think about that?
I knew about it,
Right.
but he didn't talk very much about it. It wasn't until after I came back from the service that we talked much about what he had done. I understood that his plane had been shot down, and he was missing in action for 90 days before he got back to where they could notify people that he was still alive. So for 3 months, my mother, and who was they had been dating for a while before he went into service, and his whole family didn't know what was up with him for 90 days.
Did that have any? Did him being, well, he would have been Army Air Corps.
Yeah.
But did that have any bearing for you choosing the Air Force?
No, I chose the Air Force because of what I thought was going to be my opportunity to, get training that I could use in civilian life.
Then, um, so you weren't supposed to talk to anybody about anything that you'd done over there, right? For a few years.
For 25 years.
25 years. Was that hard, or?
Not really. I just knew I couldn't talk about it, so I didn't. And whenever anybody wanted to know something, I could, just tell them something to.
Say I was there and
yeah.
Let it go.
Yeah, I could talk about being there and stuff like that. I just couldn't talk about what I had been doing.
How long were you in country?
I was there for a year, and came back to the States, and then went back for part of a second tour.
Did you know how long your tour was going to be? I mean,
the first one I knew was going to be a year.
Yeah. Did you know the second? Did you know you were going to have to go back again for a second tour?
No, because that was supposed to be voluntary. But once I got back to a place here, then they sent people TDY, which changed the rules. They could send you TDY for anything.
What's TDY?
Temporary duty.
Oh, okay. So they just kept changing the rules on you from the day you went in, didn't they?
Well, yeah, they tried to. They gave all kinds of bonuses to try to get you to re-enlist, or not re-enlist, but re-up to stay in Vietnam. And if you didn't go along with the program, then they found places to send you that. Well, most of my buddies that refused to re-up for another 6 months ended up in Minot, North Dakota, and Grand Forks, places like that. After you've been in Vietnam, then you go to sub-zero stuff, for a year. So.
Yeah. You said you got used to the temperature over there. I mean, do you really get used to?
Well, it's hot,
right?
And there's no way around it. You just get used to. You take a shower and you're sweating when you get out of the shower, and you sweat until you get in the shower.
Yeah. Was there any air conditioning? I mean, any place you could go and actually?
Yeah. The air crews, that was part of the deal. You had to have air conditioning to be able to get your rest. So we had it easy compared to the Army guys.
Yeah.
The Marines.
Did you have much interaction with the Vietnamese people when you were over there, or did you just stay?
Well, we had what they called mama-sons and papa-sons that cleaned the barracks, shined your shoes, did laundry, stuff like that. That was the only people we had a ongoing relationship with. When I was in Da Nang, town was off limits. You weren't allowed to. You could go from the base to other bases. They had a BX on Monkey Mountain, but you had to be in a vehicle to go there. You couldn't. It was only a mile away, but you couldn't walk. They didn't allow you to be on the ground outside. So.
Is that because the town was dangerous, or?
Yeah.
I just didn't know if they just didn't want you hanging out there or something, for some other reason. So you were there for a year. You came home. Then they sent you back for 6 months. How did you get out of there in 6 months? I mean, that they didn't keep you there for another year.
That was a TDY assignment.
Okay.
And I actually went back to Thailand.
Okay.
In we call it NKP, Nam Kam Panam, right across the border from Laos.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a R&R site over there for Vietnamese soldiers. And we could see them. It was like made the Mississippi look like a creek.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was probably a good 3/4 of a mile from one side to the other.
So when you say Vietnamese, you mean South Vietnamese or North Vietnamese?
North Vietnamese.
Okay. So you could see what they were doing, and.
Well, not really. You could see the tracers going up in the air when they'd get rowdy and shoot them off. We knew they were there. They knew we were on the other side of the creek, so it was a natural barrier kept
being that wide.
Yeah.
So were you doing the same type of thing there, going up in planes and?
Yeah.
So same deals. So then when you got out in 6 months or out of Viet or out of Thailand, did you come back to the States?
Yeah, I was stationed at Fort Meade in Maryland at the NSA, and then went on temporary duty over there. And then when I came back, I was doing basically the same thing, translating Vietnamese. The stuff that they'd already translated several times would get back to headquarters, and we'd go over it again. So
just make sure.
yeah.
So when we started the interview, you said when you were in California, you didn't really have any trouble with people, the public, being in the service, but later you did.
When we came back, we were told when we got out of, or went into customs, when we were getting ready to leave, they just informed us to, when you go out, make a right and stay to the right side of the hallway. We got people who are protesting out there, and they will attempt to get you to come closer to them, and then they'll try to interact with you. And what they were doing was putting flowers out to try to get you to come reach for flowers, and then they'd spit on you.
And just trying to antagonize you.
Yeah, trying to start something.
Yeah.
Calling us baby killers and all that stuff. They didn't know the difference between the Air Force and the military, and the Marines and the Army. That everybody was a baby killer.
So all that stuff that we hear and you read about in books, that's true. That's how the
it was in my case, yeah.
Right. That's how the people were reacting at that time.
Yeah, they couldn't keep them from protesting, but they kept them to the left side of the hall behind cordons. So they had to try to get you to come closer to them so they could try to start something.
How do you walk by that and have the, like you said, they don't have any idea. You're Air Force. How? Do you just say in your mind, they just don't understand, or?
Well, it was probably a good thing that they warned us ahead of time. Otherwise, you start something with people who've been in that situation for a year or longer, you might bite off more than you can chew.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
And even in our case, where we weren't actually hand-to-hand combat type people, we were still, getting shot at on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hard telling what might have happened if we hadn't known about it ahead of time.
So you get your mind kind of set.
And know to stay away from them and all that, Yeah.
So then how long were you in then from Fort Meade in the service?
Off and on, I was probably there a year and a half, the last year and a half of my 4 years, yeah.
And then you got out, and then did you come back to Newark, or?
Yeah.
And what did you do then?
I got on an apprenticeship program at the Air Force Base.
Okay.
I started there about a month after I got out of the service.
And is that then where did you work there then until you retired, or?
I worked there until the Air Force Base closed.
Oh, okay.
Or privatized.
Right.
Rockwell got the bid, and they were obligated to keep all the people on. And then a year later, Boeing bought Rockwell, and then they started laying off people. So they laid me off, and so they could hire 2 kids for $10 an hour.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So then, what did you do?
Truck driving. Was over the road for a while. Drove cement trucks for a while. I'm retired now.
Right.
Drove cab for a while.
How did you feel when you came home? Did you feel that people treated you well, or did you feel that people weren't treating Vietnam vets well, or?
Well, after what I saw in San Francisco airport, so I was still like a year behind on music. You know, there was a year's worth of music I hadn't heard. The only thing we heard over there was canned stuff from before we went over.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of you know, the only thing I knew about what was happening here in the United States was what I heard in letters, and most of the letters I got didn't mention anything like that. You know,
Right.
any of the protests that were going on and all that kind of stuff. They were protesting us. We didn't even know what was going on. You know, it didn't mean anything to us. We'd been going for a year.
Right. Was your reception in Newark any better when you came home?
Oh, sure.
Good.
I didn't have any problems here. Didn't have any problems actually anywhere except for at the airport.
When you got there.
Yeah.
Do you think the mind shift has changed in the country on how to treat veterans and Vietnam vets in particular?
That brings a tear to my eye to see them clapping for him coming back. Something we didn't see. And I never have figured out exactly, other than the war was, you know, being protested everywhere. But it wasn't the soldiers that started it. You know,
Right.
it wasn't our idea to go there. Most of us did everything we could to keep from going there, and eventually somebody had to go, I guess. So.
I mean, you were just following your orders.
Yeah.
It's not like you could say no. Or I quit. I mean, those weren't two options you had.
No, they weren't. No.
So do you feel appreciated more now as a Vietnam vet, or is it something that you still don't?
Well, I think it's going from the newer conflicts. I guess people have. I never remember having anybody, even people from my family, saying thanks for your service until recently, quite recently. You know, we didn't expect anything,
Right.
but we didn't expect to be protested against for coming home either. You know.
Right. Do you think it was after September 11th maybe that some of that changed, or was it even for you later than that?
That's probably where it started, you know, or started turning around anyway. I would assume something there.
What do you want people to remember about a Vietnam vet? I mean, just a general.
We just did the best we could with a bad situation. We didn't start it, and they wouldn't let us finish it.
Have you had no chance? Have you gone over to the Vietnam Wall, the memorial?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Pretty emotional.
Yeah.
I had my son with me at the time. I think he was 5 or 6 years old, and he knew something was wrong. He didn't know what.
Right. You could sense it.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate your service. I appreciate you taking this time to tell us about it. Is there anything else that you want to make sure we get on tape? Stories or anything?
No, nothing I can think of.